in this lesson, we'll talk more about pixels and the 2.5D canvas. All right, so the canvas in ZBrush kind of referred to as 2.5D, not really flat, but not really 3D. And so let's talk about what that means. So right now, if I just take the simple brush and I need to select what I actually want to paint. So let's select mRGB. Okay, we've also got Z add selected, and I'm just going to paint out a stroke. You can see here that it just adds this sort of square shape. And so what I want to do is kind of add an alpha to the end of my brush. I can do that by choosing the alpha, and I'm just going to choose this alpha 01. Let's clear the canvas by hitting Control N. Now, it'll take that alpha into account and create a nice smooth stroke for us. But you'll notice that several things are happening when I create this stroke. It's not just whatever color we have selected, but it's actually painting several things at once. So because we have mRGB selected, this is really two things. Okay, you can think of this as RGB, M, and then both of them combined. We are painting material, which is the M part of that. And then we're also painting the color, which is the RGB part of that. And so it's a combination of whatever color we have selected and the material. Now there's a third thing that we are painting as well, and that is the depth. You can see where this is raised up and it looks like sort of a tube. And so we're actually painting depth, material, and color. So the pixels, or the elements in ZBrush, are able to contain not only just color, but they can also contain depth information and material information as well. And so that allows us to create, come in and paint in here on our canvas. Now this is not something where we can rotate around this and we're making now a 3D model, but this is a sort of more of an illustration. So I can come in here and paint, or I can change my material. Maybe I just want to paint material. So I can come in here and now I'm replacing those pixels, not changing the depth or the color, I'm just changing the material. Now the color is changing because the material doesn't have that red in it. Or I can come in here and say, you know what, okay, now I've got this material and I've got this material. Now I only want to paint color. And then I can select a new color. And now I'm just painting that red. So this is the original material, this is the new material, this is the new color. And so we can choose, pick and choose what we want to paint at any given time. Again, this is still on our 2.5D canvas, so it does have depth, okay, but it's not a really 3D object that we can add. Now, we can come in here and use one of these 3D meshes. So let's say we grab a sphere and we can drag it onto our canvas. And you can see that this sphere actually is intersecting with this stroke that we created. So there is some sort of a 3D interaction going on. Again, we can't rotate around it, but we can go in here and start to add these, and they kind of understand the depth of the canvas and intersect the strokes that we've already created in a specific way. And then we can come back in and paint over that if we wanted to. Okay, now for the most part, what we're going to be looking at is creating a 3D model in ZBrush. And so to do that, we just need to follow a couple of steps every time. So let's clear the canvas out. So I'll hit Control N to clear that canvas. And let's choose some 3D geometry to start with. So same place we got our sphere in the tool palette, we can choose from a 3D mesh. Now we can also import our own meshes into ZBrush, but we'll just start by looking at some primitives. So the first thing we'll do is pick one. So it doesn't really matter which one you pick. I've already got the sphere selected, so I'm going to use the sphere. I'm going to draw it out onto the canvas. So I'm just clicking and dragging. You can see that it's adding it with that material and that color. So that if I cleared that canvas and I made the material white, the color white, and then changed the material to something else, let's say this red reflection, it would be that material. Okay. Now, again, I can't rotate around it. I can add more spheres based on the depth, but this is kind of the same thing as if we were painting with those strokes a minute ago. We have a nice 3D looking picture, so we've got depth, material, and color, but I still can't deal with this as a 3D model. There's not really any polygons to model or detail to create as far as a 3D model goes. So again, I can clear up the canvas. What I want to make sure to do when I draw this onto the canvas is I immediately want to go into edit mode. That's the little button up here by draw. You can also hit the T key. So you can just kind of get in the habit of, once you draw your model onto the canvas, just hit the T key or go to edit mode. Now, once we're in edit mode, things change a little bit. So what I can do is I can left click to kind of rotate around. I can Alt left click to pan around the scene. And if I hit Alt with the left mouse button and then let Alt off, I can move in and out. We can also turn on the floor. All right, so once we've got the floor on, the 3D object makes a little bit more sense. We see it in a little bit more context. We can also turn on perspective. And now we have a nice 3D object in our scene, on our canvas. Now, just remember, we have to be in edit mode to deal with this as a 3D object. If we were to go out of edit mode by hitting T or hitting this edit button, suddenly it's now dropped to the canvas. So it still looks the same from that angle, but we can't really pick it up and move it again. We can't rotate around as we were doing before. It's now in that same initial state where it's just dropped down to the 2.5D canvas. In order to get it back, we can, whatever changes we've made are still there. All we have to do is redraw it onto the canvas. Okay, so we would just clear the canvas out, draw it back out into the canvas, and so make sure we go to edit mode. And so all the changes that we make are stored in that. And so to just kind of illustrate this, and this is very important because it's a little bit different than the way some other applications work. But let me just kind of modify this a little bit. And this is not important. We'll go over all of this as we go through the process. But I just want to change something. Okay, so I'm just going to pull out some detail on this. So I've now modified this model. Okay, now we'll learn how to save out our geometry as we go, but right now let's say it just exists here in the tool palette. We've brought in a primitive shape and we've started to do some sculpting on it, and we've hit the T key and now it's dropped down. I've lost all of that work that I've done. Well, you haven't lost it, it's still there, we just need to draw it back out. And so right now what we have is dropped to the canvas. We'll hit Control N to clear it, draw that back out into our canvas. Make sure to go back and hit T, and you can see that all that detail is still there. So it exists here in our tool palette. If we want to save it externally for a later ZBrush session, then we can go ahead and save that out. But just keep in mind that when you draw out your geometry onto your canvas, you have to hit Edit or hit the T key to be able to go into that mode where you can deal with that as a 3D object. Otherwise, it's simply dropped to that canvas that we looked at earlier as pixels, which have depth, and that may be what you want. You may be doing some sort of an illustration. But if you're trying to build a production model or do some sculpting on a model, normally you'll want to be in edit mode to do that work. Okay, so very important. Hopefully that sinks in. Just remember, if it gets dropped to the canvas, don't worry. You can always clear the canvas and draw it back back into your canvas, and then go back into edit mode, and you'll have all of that detail back in there. Okay, so that's a quick explanation of pixels and the 2.5D canvas. Let's talk in the next lesson about working with files and how we can start to save out different files and what those actually contain. So we'll talk about that in the next lesson.